Hey guys, welcome back to Rewind Stop Fast Forward. I'm Jordan, and today I'm going to be reviewing Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, directed by Joachim Roning or Joachim. I have no idea how to pronounce his name. He's one of the directors from the newest Parts of the Caribbean, Dead Man Tells No Tales. The film also stars Angelina Jolie, Elle Fanning, and Michelle Pfeiffer. So stay tuned for the review. So I suppose it's probably good to start by kind of giving a bit of context as to what I thought about the first Maleficent film. I saw that in cinemas and I thought it was a pretty average film. I was very underwhelmed by it. I remember seeing the trailers at the time and I thought it looked okay. I meant Disney was doing something a bit different, putting a bit of a spin on the character. But even so, I thought it was just a very kind of bland movie that didn't really do a whole lot with its kind of premise. And I don't think that film warranted getting a sequel, but obviously because it did really well at the box office, it got a sequel regardless, and that is Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. I was a bit like, I've seen the trailers, I was a bit worried as to kind of how good this film could be. I mean, it looked really generic, and it was directed by one of the guys who did Parts of the Caribbean, Dead Man Tells No Tales, which was not a good film at all, so that doesn't kind of help my excitement whatsoever to see the film. So what did I think of Maleficent, Mistress of Evil? To be honest, it's kind of tedious and a little boring. I mean, the movie is primarily Elle Fanning and Prince Philip wanting to get married and unify fairies and humans. Some shit goes wrong between both parties and, some fighting happens. Yeah. It's not a particularly... I mean, it sounds more exciting than what it ends up being because a lot of the movie is just kind of set up for the third act, which is then the big battle sequences you see in the trailer. But primarily the movie is just, plods along and it's kind of setting up humans to be the bad guys and the fairies to be the good guys. And yeah, and when I say this movie is really tedious and boring, I really want to pinpoint kind of a couple of specific elements as to why I felt that way. Part of which is due to the directing. I thought that the director really didn't bring much to the film, and it felt really like, I feel like the film itself feels really flat and just uninteresting and really boring in its design. Especially when you look at the production design of the film. I mean, a lot of the costumes throughout even the entirety of the film are just really clean and cleanly designed, and like a lot of the castles are all just like perfectly set out and set up. So everything feels like it's very precise in how it's designed and how it's made, but then it just doesn't feel particularly tangible or real, and you don't feel very immersed in the world because of it. So I think that's a real big issue. And even when you look at the I think the idea was to make one side, so the humans, because they're evil in the film, have them feel a little bit more clean and, sterile and kind of a bit more like that, and have the magic and the fairy people kind of be more dirty and grungy and that kind of thing. But even so, even like the Moors in the film feel so cleanly designed and so pristine that it doesn't even matter. I mean, the whole film just feels kind of like really clean, has like a real clean sheen over it, and I think it suffers because of it, because again, as just visually watching it, it just is really uninteresting to watch, and I'm just like not engaged in the film on a visual level, at least. Even like the score for me is really generic. I mean, it's just kind of your big orchestral numbers, and it just kind of plays in the background. I mean, it's your typical Disney score at the end of the day. One other thing about the costumes is, especially, there are certain characters you meet later on, and it's shown in the trailer, that are like creatures like Maleficent. They're like bird-like creatures. And like the costumes, to me, it was weird, but they almost felt like they were high quality cosplay costumes. They didn't really feel particularly, immersed into the world. They just felt really oddly designed. I will say though that I think a lot of the performances across the board are really good in this film. Angelina Jolie's good once again as Maleficent. Michelle Pfeiffer in particular for me worked really well as the villain. Ella Fanning was fine. I think she got a bit more to do in this film than what she did in the previous Maleficent film. They expanded a bit more the prince role in this film, and they cast a different actor. He did what he could with the role. It wasn't really a whole lot there. But overall, across the board, all the actors did a good job, I thought. So one thing, like, this film kind of further proves to me, I love the fantasy genre, and films like Maleficent kind of prove what's wrong with fantasy films, in films specifically, I should say. We have had plenty of good fantasy films, especially when you look at something like Lord of the Rings, but I think the problem is taking the time to be able to set up the worlds. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, especially these days when it comes to fantasy films, they tend to prioritize visual effects over, building a really strong world and a really strong story. That's even evident in this film, because when it starts off, the first 5 minutes of the film is literally dedicated to just sweeping visual effects shots, especially when you're going through the moors and you start seeing all the creatures and it's like all close up. And it's like fancy the way that it's done, but it's just like very stylized, and it shows that it's kind of more prioritizing that over, building the world and the story. And that's kind of unfortunate to see, and that's one thing that, I think why a lot of studios are starting to look at building fantasy universes on screen through television, so you can properly take the time to build your world rather than just kind of drop pointers in and try to immerse them in a world within 2 hours, which is a really difficult task, and one that, like a lot of films like this, fail at doing. And the problem is when you get to kind of, especially in the third act, the big battle sequences, because you haven't had the time to properly set up your characters and the world and to actually make your audience give a shit about what is happening. It's cool, and they make some of the fighting feel visceral, and they shoot some things really well. And in this film, the villains, at least you hate them, which is a start. Aside from those factors, everything else just kind of falls flat when you're watching that third act action sequence, because you don't feel like, it's not like Helm's Deep where it's this mass build up to this big battle, and you've watched all these characters go on this journey and you're invested in their story. In this, you're just sort of yeah, okay, I like Maleficent, sure, and you like the characters, but it's Disney, it's a very Disney-fied movie, everything's going to have a happy ending, so you're just kind of there for the ride, and you're just kind of yeah, it's cool visually, there's some really nice shots, I suppose, and I feel like I'm not giving them enough credit, I suppose. You can tell that they have at least attempted to give the shots some, sense of grandiose nature, but it just feels really flat and uninteresting at the end of the day. I think as much as they want you to be immersed and to feel the weight of the battle and to feel the epicness of it, I think it just falls flat. And I think a lot of that's due to the fact that they're trying to build too much into a small package and a small film. But that's me personally, but I feel like younger audiences could get more out of this film. I think that they did try to find a balance between, having fun moments for younger audiences and moments of a bit more seriousness for older audiences, but I think overall it may entertain younger people. I think it's going to be just kind of a very turn your brain type of movie for older audiences in particular. In terms of another thing that I think falls flat for this film is the humor And it's not supposed to be a funny film, but it's it's like all Disney films, they have to inject a little bit of humor and levity into the film. And it's that really kind of groan-worthy humor where whenever you hear it, you're just like, well, shit, that did not land. That felt really forced. It just doesn't work. And especially they try to infuse that into the three fairy characters that we saw from the previous Maleficent film, all of which are actually really annoying to watch. I mean, none of them have much personality at all, and they just kind of bumble around from scene to scene. And it just, I mean, they don't get utilized as much in this film, thank God for it. But, yeah, I think the humor just, I'd rather they just don't use it so I don't have to sit through it in a sense. But that's me as well, personally. Maybe again, younger audiences may find that kind of stuff more, engaging. And at the end of the day, that's what this film is primarily for, is younger audiences, not necessarily me. So I can recognize that. But still, going into the film, I didn't feel like I was that invested or connected into the world and the story and the characters. So yeah, that's my review for Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. If you guys check it out, let me know what you thought. I'm curious, like I said, some people may get a kick out of it. I don't know. It depends if you go into it with the right mindset, I suppose. But yeah, I knew what I was going to get. I didn't really like the first one very much, and I didn't think the sequel did much to improve on the first one. I couldn't really tell you which one's better. I might have to watch them back to back to kind of determine which one I liked more. But yeah, that's my review for Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. So like and subscribe if you want, guys. Otherwise, I'll see you for the next review. Thanks very much.